Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Coffee with the Therapist. I'm Natalie, and I'm talking with Natalie, who is the therapist, and she is also a great friend of mine. In our conversation today, we're going to be talking about dealing with stress and burnout, especially around the holiday season. And I read a quote by an Irish poet. He said the antidote to exhaustion is not rest, it's passion. It's kind of like we're talking about our passion. Um, yeah, what are your thoughts about that? The antidote to exhaustion is not rest, it's passion.
I love that. I've not heard who said that. Do you?
David White.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of that saying, you never work a day in your life if you do something you love, kind of thing.
Mm, yeah.
It makes sense. Um, yeah, when you're kind of wor- living and working in purpose,
Mhm.
I think it makes it more meaningful and gives a lot of more space to hold a lot of difficult things.
That's true.
Burnout can
Yeah.
easily if we don't take care of ourselves in that way.
Mm. Yeah, so maybe there are people out there that might have to work those jobs that aren't really necessarily giving them a lot of that juice, that passion and meaning. And so I guess that would easily lead to burnout or maybe some chronic fatigue or exhaustion. What would your advice be to someone in that situation? I'm thinking about a client I'm particularly working with, and he's so close to retirement, but the way the leadership is doing things, he's not able to finish his career at this company the way he dreamed he would. So there's a little bit of that stress.
Oh, sure. Um, yeah, it's a really good question. With passion, like the feeling I get is like a love
Mhm.
for what you do. And I don't know, just it's a feeling, right? And so if you can find that in any area of your life, so it might not be at work, and maybe there's grief about that you envisioned a certain project or goal to achieve at that job, and because of multiple factors that doesn't happen, and so there may be grief with that. um and what are some other ways to tap into your own passion for whatever that could
Yeah.
be, or it could like kind of redirect you and to something that maybe you've not even thought of before. But yeah, that just sucks. Sorry.
It does. It does. Sometimes we just gotta say it. Like it's no
Yeah.
fun. I mean, that's not what you would want. And I liked what you said earlier about like how maybe it's an idea like in the middle of the workday, maybe it's somehow connecting to love or like just going out for a walk to be able to let go some of those stressful emotions or that sense of grief you might be feeling like this is not how I wanted it to be.
uh, yeah. And whatever our jobs are, I haven't, been a therapist my all my adult life. And so when I work jobs that, maybe were not so meaningful, um, what I found helpful is to find meaning within the work. So in how I worked. And so whether it was waiting tables or serving customers, right? It's like that whole sort of like service coming from me, and what that can mean in a day over so many interactions.
Yeah.
So
Natalie, I remember when I was living in New Orleans and you worked at, I forget the restaurant, but you were so happy. I mean, just walking in there, like, and you totally did embody that. Like you served me. And I believe that was when I was first dating my husband now.
yeah,
And
that's
you like, I mean, oh my gosh, I left there so stuffed. You just, You were so good to us. But I saw you caring for your other tables in the same way. I think I did get a little special treatment.
I hope so. Yeah, no, yeah, I find that whatever can make it meaningful for you and how you do things, it's not so much what you do, but how you do things. I think it can make
Mhm.
a difference with the burnout.
Yeah, it's like that small shift can make a world of difference when we come to it from that space of like how can I show up in a loving way and how do I want to be in this experience?
Yeah.
Something I've been noticing in my life and in coaching sessions with other people is that many of us are experiencing fatigue and stress and some of this burnout we're kind of talking about. And I'm just wondering, like, now that we're moving into holiday seasons, what do you think we can do to support ourselves during this time leading up to the holidays?
Sure, yes. So it seems like holiday times are so linked together with stress and burnout and all of the things we take on regarding
Mm,
holidays. So it's like gift giving or Christmas party, the holiday parties, whatever it is that we're doing during the holidays. I think it just requires maybe a lot more of us. And so, I would just recommend do what you really want to and what you can and try
mhm,
to um, just play by your own rules in that way.
mm,
Like you don't have to go to every holiday party, but you really want to connect with the people there. And so you might feel conflicted. So what are some other ways that you can feel connected to the people that you want to see at a holiday party, but at the same time, maybe not go to the party? Could be, I don't know, baking cookies or something. Like
mm,
I just think outside of the box and try not to put any harsh rules and expectations on yourself,
mm.
especially if you've experienced loss. And that can be what comes up during the holidays is that reminder of the person, that we love is not here anymore. And so
Right.
honoring what may come up and that maybe you're not going to want to go to that holiday party.
I appreciate that, Natalie, because it's kind of like we got can take the pressure off of ourselves that we don't have to be
Yeah.
shitting on ourselves on top of maybe the other expectations that just can come maybe unintentionally from friends and family around the holidays, but really honoring what feels good to you, especially if this is a time of where you've lost a loved one.
Yeah.
Let those things go, like take good
Yeah.
care of yourself.
Yeah. Make yourself a priority. And, you know, there's a general rule of like within the first year, the first of everything, the first Christmas, the first New Year, the first, Easter holiday, all the first birthdays, anniversaries. Um, but even beyond the year, there's no really set timeline of like when you should get over
Mm,
um the
yeah.
loss of a loved one. So even if it was 20 years ago, if for some reason it may be catching up with you and it's coming up for you a lot, then honor that. And like you said, the less pressure, the better. Um,
Yeah, it's kind of like, we want to be merry and bright, but if we're operating out of this place of judging ourselves too harshly or putting too many rules and expectations on ourselves, then it kind of takes us away from that a spirit of the holiday season. And
yeah,
even, don't you think, like, even, our hearts are so huge, Natalie, and we have this capacity to experience grief and sorrow and still at the same time hold this space for joy and love. I, what are your thoughts about that along the lines of grief and with the holiday season? Would that be a supportive conversation to have with ourselves?
yeah, around the joy and the grief. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's yeah, I kind of feel like it's like a double-sided coin. So we wouldn't grieve if we didn't love, and
Mhm.
If you just allow yourself to grieve, a lot of times the problem that becomes that comes up with grief is that there's either no allowance for it with the people around us or allowance from ourselves. And that's when grief can become problematic.
Yeah.
So the more that we can just allow it to be and get the support that we may need throughout that,
Mhm.
um, then we do have greater capacity for other feelings like joy and love and
Makes
happiness.
sense.
Like you can't just have one side of the emotions and shut out the others. It's like it's all or nothing.
Right. So it's almost taking that time to be compassionate with yourself, whether that might look like talking to a therapist or talking to a good friend and just saying, hey, I just don't expect you to fix this for me. I just need to talk about my loved one. And then in doing that, we are able to maybe find that place where we can feel a connection, let a little love and joy in our heart a bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes it's complex.
Yeah.
The grief can be complex. So can be hard to talk about some things. So that's when it can be really helpful to talk to a therapist when you feel stuck between wanting
Mhm.
to and not feeling like you're able to. So anyone
Mhm.
feels like they're kind of stuck in
Mhm.
that, or they can see what would be helpful and good, but
Mhm.
don't feel that permission to do that, or you know, maybe there's just a lot there.
We don't always get taught how to move through it. Like in our culture that's so productive oriented, like it almost seems like we lump grief into that same idea. Like we got to take care of this, get it done so we can move on, and that's not healthy.
Yeah, and you're right. It's like we really have. I mean, I know my grandparents. I'm 45. My grandparents, didn't really have any, uh, I guess, personal experience of expressing healthy emotion or just expressing emotion and having
Yeah.
and talking about things. So secrets were a big thing in my family, and I think a lot of families that we just don't talk about things. And
Mhm.
I would imagine we'd have to go more generations back to find and some ancestors that were actually really taking time and ritual and community to really, um, I guess, tend to those wounds. Of,
Mhm. Mhm.
so, yeah, we've gotten away from it, and I think there's no better time than now to reconnect to a grief practice.
Mhm.
Um, it's kind of weird to say, like, I wanted to have a grief practice, but I think it can
Yeah.
be helpful to kind of reflect on the things that you have lost, the subtle losses, I guess, the invisible losses, like the job, right? Like,
Sure.
how did
Or
this fit me?
maybe broken relationships with family, like that comes up during the holiday season.
Totally. And another thing about grief is that anger can be such a big part of grief. And I'm not sure if that's recognized enough. Like, and so, yeah, grief is not just like this one thing, it's so many things.
Yeah. And I really, your idea of a process, a practice, if you will, it makes sense to me because that's kind of gives us a guide for how to reflect, how to work with these complex emotions that we're talking about. One thing comes to mind, like if we were kind of breaking these down into little points for people, it would be what you said earlier about letting some of these things go, or maybe you do want to challenge yourself to connect more in person with people. So that might look like having some type of ritual where you honor your loved one before you go to some kind of event, like maybe you do a walk in their honor, or you pass by the cemetery first or something.
Absolutely. I mean, all those things that people do are, are really helpful and meaningful.
Mhm.
And, you know, there are really no rules. It's whatever sparks, you know, like an interest or
Healing.
desire of like, yeah, I'd like to go do that thing. And it doesn't have to be something typical. It can be like, I'm going to walk the labyrinth at the park and,
Mm,
in honor of my loved one,
mhm.
having just time
Yeah.
and just, yeah, really get creative with it. I think the creative process is really
Mhm.
helpful in processing grief. You know?
Yeah, that makes sense to me because it's kind of getting you into a place of maybe catalyzing some healing or change for us to be thinking about, how can I be with this emotion right now and in the most loving and supportive way I can in this moment.
Yeah, I love that. And then when I hear you say that, it makes me feel like that self-compassion of like, how would you how would
Mhm.
you speak to someone you really love or a small child or
Mhm.
you really care about, a friend, a loved one? How would you speak to them? And can you turn that inwards for yourself?
Yeah. So there's this tenderness that we're giving to ourselves, especially this time of the year, but always like with us dealing with loss of a loved one. Like, definitely, this is the time to take care of yourself and put yourself first. So,
Yeah.
yeah, having those special ways of honoring your loved one, connecting to your loved one, practicing self compassion, and what might be like some rituals for doing the holiday a little differently, because probably trying to do the holiday the same way, it might not feel good.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, this is kind of like whatever aligns with you, and your
Mm,
values and what's important to you. So, for one person, it may be like a quiet church service, and for somebody, it wouldn't be, or, might be a meditation or um, something creative where, maybe like you write a poem. Or
mhm,
I knew someone who had, it was a friend of a friend. She lost her daughter to like a car accident years and years ago. And in her backyard, there was like this hidden uh, garden where you'd walk
mm,
this path and you couldn't really see it from the path. But once you got through the little doorway of the garden, it just opened up into this like lush, beautiful
mm,
green floral oasis. And at the, you know, in the front of the garden was when you walk in, there is some candles.
mm,
And she said she would often go in there and just sit and light a candle in honor when she would think about her daughter.
mhm.
I just thought that was so beautiful. Um,
Yeah.
Nature can be a really accessible and
Mm,
easy way to practice ritual, and it's not a thing. It's an inner process,
right.
like she's just sitting there lighting that candle. And
Mm.
it's very, I think it's very healing.
Oh, it does. It sounds healing just listening to that, like how she opened up to the beauty of nature and
Yeah.
was willing to slow down with that, with herself, like slow down and actually be with those feelings and interact with them in a way that did provide for some comfort. It sounds like that was a very comforting experience.
Yeah. And I think those losses like that force us to slow down, really.
Mm, yeah.
So I don't know how she was before, but
Mhm.
she's definitely taking time now.
Mm.
Mhm.
And I guess that's so honoring to the loved one that you lost. Like if we're just trying to push through and numb out, and I guess sometimes maybe we might need to do that. We might need to be in that for a while, numbing ourselves to it. But at the end of the day, I would think that it would honor your loved one that has gone on, passed away, that you would take that time to slow down and feel it. Um,
Mhm. Yeah,
and
because
even for yourself, you're honoring yourself too.
you're honoring the love that you have for that person
Yeah.
and that they're not there with you physically. And yeah, so taking the time in ritual and whatever we do is taking time with that loved one that's not here anymore.
Mhm.
It's an expression of love.
Mhm. Yeah. I heard someone else share about a ritual, and the idea was to think about your loved one, like think about what did they like to do? What is something about that person? Like for example, if they love the ocean, maybe you go drive to the ocean or something like that.
That, yeah, right. Yeah, it's so symbolic. And
Mhm.
or, did they have places they wanted to travel to
Yeah.
or have traveled and you want to be there?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so really, I love that. Anything that connects you. But again, speaking to the complex grief,
Mhm.
where there may be like some trauma there in either the relationship, that can be difficult. So just to kind of speak to that for anyone who
Mm.
feel like there's a block there, that it's not so easy. Um, it's not your fault that it's not easy. It
Mhm.
didn't come out of nowhere.
So again, it really does sound like there's that element of compassion that even with the complexity and maybe you had a difficult relationship with this person, but there's still love there. Yeah, just
It can run a whole range of experiences.
yeah.
So, if that relationship was really complex, just don't try to expect it from yourself to be like a cookie cutter process and saying like, well, that therapist said
Mm.
I should be doing this, or I should
Mhm.
like really just start where you are. And, there can be healing after the person is gone too.
I get see that. Yeah. So there might be like some conversations that you might have, either like if you believe in God or you believe in a higher power, or even if you wanted to like have a dialogue with that person that has gone on, whether it's journaling practice or just verbally communicating it out loud by yourself or something. Yeah, just a way to get that out of the body.
Yeah, that would be really amazing if, you can get to that, you know,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
get help.
Mhm. Yeah, that sounds like maybe that's one of the moments where, like we talked about earlier, getting help with a therapist would be wise. Yeah. Glad you mentioned that, Natalie.
Yeah, well, a lot of times it can turn and we can internalize and self-blame, or like, I'm not a good enough griever, or
Oh
I
my gosh, that is so true.
must be something I'm missing. And it really isn't. Like, you're just being human, and being human, there's complexity to our experiences and where we
Mm,
come from and who we've come from. And
yeah.
so just general expectations can kind of set us up for feeling worse, if that makes
And
sense.
judging ourselves, or I heard this one lady share that, and she is a therapist, and she shared that when her dad died, that her sister cried like from the beginning of the funeral for days after, and she didn't, but like a week after, she could not stop crying. She she cried for like a solid week, and then that was her process. Like, maybe you're not feeling anything. I mean, maybe you will later, or maybe it's just whatever is, I don't know how to put language to that, but the self-acceptance.
Yeah, it's like, to say like how do you grieve is like saying how do you love?
Mm,
There's no answer to it. It's just a faculty within us. So, whatever that is, follow the wisdom of it and
mhm,
just don't do it alone. It,
mhm.
you we're not really meant to be in isolation, right? Like we
Yeah.
survive in groups. We're born into families, we're born into communities, and that's really what we've gotten away from, especially in grief, is that we are in our own homes, in our own rooms, and we're sitting with our own thoughts, and we're so isolated. And
Yeah.
so, the more that you can surround yourself with love and people who don't have expectations. Some people are well-meaning and have great
Mm,
intentions and want the best for you and say really terrible things like
yeah.
should be over this by now, or
Mm, mm.
just you want to be careful you know
Yeah, that's so true. Like, they're well-meaning, and you might be able to, you could even say that, say, I know this is coming from a good place, but that really hurt me, or like that is not helpful.
all right, yeah, don't this is not advice.
Oh, I missed, what did you say, Natalie? I missed it.
Say screw you.
Well, and that might feel very empowering and liberating just to let it out. They're gonna be okay. They're gonna get over it, but I think first and foremost is take good care of yourself. That's kind of what.
I was joking, but in a way that I wasn't. Maybe we don't want to tell them off in front of them when they give us, bad advice. But let yourself feel angry for getting bad advice.
Yeah.
Let yourself feel whatever you feel when well-intentioned people
Mhm.
just miss the mark. We
Yeah.
just live in a society that runs away from really uncomfortable feelings. That's
Mhm.
kind of how we're raised. And so this can be really uncomfortable for people. And so just
Right
don't
on.
isolate yourself with how you're feeling with people who may be telling you things that just don't sit right, you know.
It's almost like you really have to be, as you were saying earlier, that thinking about how you would want to treat a child or a dear friend, and practicing that for your own self. And that might even look like when well-intentioned people want you to engage, they want you to participate, they want you to be happy.
They want you to be happy. Yeah.
So maybe kind of what I'm hearing you share is that let them know, like, maybe one day I will be happy again. It is my hope too, but right now I'm not happy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't need to be. Like, why
Mhm.
would I be? It's kind of like
Yeah.
taking a stand for your own process and saying, I don't have to play by the rules of
Mhm.
other people's expectations and what makes them feel comfortable.
Mhm.
It really become when you can dive into your grief process in a way that's healthy for you, it can really help you with boundaries and
Mhm.
finding your voice and drawing the line when you need to. And so,
Mhm.
and with love, I've done it with people, really close to me, and our relationship is better for it because we're
Mhm.
honest.
Yeah, that's true. It does bring more intimacy into the relationship when we're able to be authentic and be able to communicate with that sense of vulnerability. Even it can be vulnerable to share that I'm not happy, or I didn't like what you said, but that will could lead to greater intimacy in the relationship.
Yeah, that we can like make mistakes and we can like repair and
Yes.
we can be human and really continue to build this relationship with each other. So
Mm,
mistakes are
mhm,
not to be to get closer to.
mm. Natalie, I know we're talking about grief in the holidays, and also I'm hearing that this can even help folks that aren't maybe experiencing a present loss of a loved one through the holidays. Like, even in general, with stress and burnout, just comes from, I don't know, I've heard it's eclipse season. And so I guess that generates some chaos, and just the world today we live in can feel a little overwhelming. If you were to give a, like, here's a playbook for how to protect your sanity.
you know, Drop the rule book, you know, do things differently as you see fit. Be careful of isolation, so there could be like, I don't want to go to anything
Right.
and isolate. So it's definitely okay to kind of go inwards and cocoon. Just don't stay there for too long. And
Hmm.
it becomes like a way of life, and then it's really uncomfortable to be around people. So, having a trusted friend or two that you stay in contact, or loved one, is really helpful and important.
Mm.
um yeah, throw the rule book away. There's
Yeah.
no, and like
I
I
love
said,
that.
even if it's a loss from 20 plus years ago, like, we pathologize grief, and we
I
say like,
know.
grieving over 1 year, then you're in trouble. And not that people don't fall into depression, they do.
Hmm.
But if we tend to the grief and really get help and really honor that process, the more likely you won't fall into depression or it manifests into something else or exacerbate a certain, like an ongoing, maybe chronic illness or
Mm.
mental health diagnosis that you may already have. So
Yeah.
all in all, just, try to back away from the expectations, be kind to you, and yeah, just don't do it alone.
Mm. Natalie, thank you for this conversation today. I enjoyed our chat about this, and I know this is going to help so many people this time of the year. That, the holidays can be such a lonely time, and then if you're coupling that with grief, even more so. Um, but like you said earlier, some other places that you can connect with, like, I know legacy.com is a place that I believe they have some groups, or grief.com has resources.
Yeah.
Uh, mm,
Yeah, look at, sometimes locally it's a little bit harder to find good support groups, but like you said, grieve.com, the David Kessler program, I mean, that he's just really good. And
mhm,
even if you find something that's more, worldwide or national, I think, you know, it's a way to kind of channel
mhm,
your grief and to really spend time with yourself in a way that feels supportive
mhm, mhm.
in the
Yeah,
process. Yeah.
yeah. So throw that rule book away,
Throw
and,
throw it out.
like, yeah, throw it out and really be kind and loving to yourself. And then that's just going to help you to show up, for yourself, and to have possibly the energy to do other things during the holidays or recreate some old traditions. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you for our next coffee with a therapist, aka the Nat and Nat show. And reach out to us with any questions you have, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.